find your passion, it ignites you as a person. You just feel awesome. Hello, what is going on? All right, so the reason why I'm making this video is because I wish somebody would have told me this information when I first started rolling because of this story. All right, so I started jiu-jitsu back in 2016, in May of 2016. So I had been training, like rolling live for about 6 months, and this other guy started training, and he was probably like 6'1", 6'2", probably had like, I was 135, he was maybe like 180, kind of like strong, wiry built. So he started, and he started rolling probably like 6 months later. So I had about 6 months of training on him. So he asked me to roll. It was one Saturday afternoon. So I was like, yeah, why not? So I started rolling with him, and I got him in the mount position. So I was on top of him. He tried to escape, and when he had his hands down trying to push my hips, I went into the collar of his gi and applied a jiu-jitsu technique submission called a collar choke. And so I was on top of him. My head was down beside his head because that's how you do the technique of the choke. And all of a sudden I noticed his breathing changed. Like it happened pretty fast, and probably like 7 seconds, and his breathing changed, and it was almost like a gargling sound. And I was just thinking to myself, like, man, you know, like I'm holding on to this choke, and I'm like, man, this sounds horrible. Like he's really fighting through this, you know what I mean? Like, why isn't he tapping? And for the life of me, I'm like, man, he sounds really bad. Why isn't he tapping? And about like a couple seconds, I'm like, okay, like this is just weird. And I lifted my head to look at his face, and he was out cold. I had put him to sleep with the jiu-jitsu technique on the mats while we were training. Now the reason why, and afterwards, I was just like, because it was very scary for me, because nobody told me that like they still made noise after. Like nobody really told me what that was like. And if you know from training, when you put on a submission, like a choke submission, when you and your partners are on the mat training and you're training your jiu-jitsu technique submissions, we tap before going out. Like that's what we do. When you put on a submission, and let's say they go to sleep, it is very important that you don't hold the choke. Once they go to sleep, if your training partner goes to sleep, when you are choking them, you need to release the choke immediately, because if you hang on for longer, you could cause permanent sleep. This is because like you're cutting off the blood supply to their brain. So afterwards, I was like horrified, because I was like, oh my God, what if I didn't realize that he was actually like out cold and like held on for too long? So this is why I wanted to make this video for you, to let you know like what it's like when that happens, and like what is it like on the receiving end. That way you tap out in time, because this is super important from a safety perspective, to make sure you maintain the safety of you and your partners while you're enjoying the sport of jiu-jitsu training, okay? So the one thing that really surprised me is like I didn't expect there to be like this audible noise when somebody went out. Like I expected there to be like silence, but just know that if you are in the middle of a choke technique, whether that be like a triangle or like a head and arm or a collar or a rear naked choke, like any of these jiu-jitsu techniques that you are implementing on the mat during live training with your partner, know that if they start to make a funny noise, breathing wise that you should verbally check in with them. Be like, hey, are you okay? And see if they respond. One thing you can check too is if their body has gone limp. When you put somebody to sleep, like they will go limp. And I didn't notice this because I was on top. And I was just so focused on getting that choke in, and it happened so quick. Like it was a really good choke, like because he went out fast. Like I was expecting it to take a lot longer than it actually did. So just know that if you have something on, if you have a technique on super clean, meaning that you're just let's say you have a triangle, you are just pressing up against their arteries, they will still breathe through it all because their trachea isn't impacted. It's a common fallacy that like we think that like we associate choking with a obstruction of the of our windpipe, of our breathing pipe, of our trachea. But in the jiu-jitsu world, in terms of submission techniques, a choke, if it is clean, means that you have your airway is completely free, you can breathe just fine. So if you are, so this is the receiving end. So let's say you're a newbie, you're out on the mat, you have what feels like somebody is putting you in a position where you have pressure being applied to either side of your neck. Like this is important because this is an overall like rule, because there are many techniques in order to accomplish this. This is the beauty of jiu-jitsu, and this is also the best kept secret. The best kept secret in jiu-jitsu is that women who trained can submit men who have never trained. And I know this is so hard to believe. Like in my comments, I always get this dude that's like, it's the same type of dude who's like, I trained, yeah, I mean, I lifted weights and I have like common sense, like I'd be able to defend myself. Like, how could you have common sense against techniques that you've never seen? Like, would you go up to like a D1 wrestler and be like, my common sense can like override all of the techniques that you've trained for 4 years? Like, absolutely not. Like, your best bench press is not going to be a good defense against my jiu-jitsu. I'm sorry. That's just not like, I just can't. It's hard to explain. It's like if the person doesn't know, if you don't know what you don't know, then you will have these arguments that make no sense to the people that do know how much you don't know, if that makes sense. So when you are on the receiving end of it, let's say you are a new white belt and you are starting to roll for the first time, definitely check out my video called The Art of Tapping, because I go into each thing in depth. But here we're not going to go in depth. I'm just going to give you a quick little thing, but you should definitely watch that video. So basically, if you feel pressure being applied to your neck, I remember when I first started, I actually asked one of the upper belts to like choke me out because I wanted to know like the limits of when to tap, because nobody really told me when to tap, and I wanted to know for safety reasons, because you don't want to be continuously getting choked out on the mat because your brain is being denied oxygen, and your brain needs oxygen, okay? Like, you're not going to be very smart after a couple of years of training if you don't tap before getting choked out, okay? So what's going to happen is you're going to feel like pressure against your neck through some sort of submission. It could be a combination of somebody's arm or leg, or both their legs, or the forearm and the bicep. There's so many jiu-jitsu techniques to get this done. It could be your own collar. It could be your own arm pressed up against one side with their leg on the other side. Like, there's so many ways, but if you feel this, you will still be able to breathe. So don't think that what that guy probably was thinking was like, oh, I'll be fine, like whatever, she's smaller than me, she's only been training 6 months more than me, I can still breathe, I'm fine. Then all of a sudden he went out. So if you're feeling pressure on your neck, you're gonna still be able to breathe. That does not mean you're not in danger of going to sleep. Know that when you are about to go to sleep, it's almost like your vision gets smaller, like more narrowed. Sometimes you lose vision in one eye. Like, for example, one time I was, my coach used me to demonstrate a technique. So I was with him in front of the entire class, and he's trying to explain how this technique happens. It was a triangle. And so he's explaining, like, while my head is between his legs and I'm in the triangle position, like submission position, he's trying to explain to the class what goes where and how to do it. And I am like, oh my God, I think I can't see out of one eye. Like, I'm going out. Like, so I had to like tap out just from him doing like a demonstration of the technique, because I would have, I would have went to sleep. So yeah, so if your vision starts to go a little bit smaller, definitely tap before that happens. And if you do end up falling asleep, it's just literally like falling asleep. And when you wake up, you're gonna have a second of like, where am I? Who are these people? And then it's gonna register. Like in self-defense situations, like a lot of stories I've heard are like the person waking up and just feeling like really stupid about what happened and just kind of like walking away, being like, oh, okay, like my bad. So yeah, now these are techniques on the mats that you will find that are in the category of choke submissions. In Jiu-Jitsu, there are also submissions that are joint lock based. So those are your arm bars, those are your Kimuras, your Americanas. Like, I'm not gonna go into too much detail, watch The Art of Tapping video. But one very important thing to keep in mind, when you're dealing with joint submissions, you need to apply these super slowly. That way you give your partner time to tap. So if you put on a quick armbar, that will literally be like 2 seconds, maybe even 1 second, and that's not enough time for your partner to tap. With a choke, on the other hand, it's gonna take like a couple more, it's gonna take more than 1 to 2 seconds for somebody to go out. Typically if you are in a choke submission, sometimes it isn't on right. And a lot of times it isn't. And a lot of times the people don't believe in it, and they will readjust their choke technique. And every time your training partner readjust, like if you're doing a live roll and your training partner keeps on readjusting, that gives the blood, like, you get like another, pump of blood up there. Like it's cut off, they readjust. Oh, I got it back. Oh, I got it back. So that's one lesson too, is if you are on the receiving end and the person keeps on readjusting, like, you are safe. If you are trying to complete a technique submission while training with your training partners on the mat, one other well-kept secret is to believe in your choke and do not adjust. Just let it be and see what happens, and have confidence in it, because the confidence vibe, like, I've gotten out of while training, I've gotten out of plenty of chokes because I could feel the vibe that they did not believe. One time I was in a guillotine and I could just tell he didn't believe it. So I just started putting like top pressure on him with my shoulder, kind of like driving down, and he let go. And he was like, afterwards, he's like, Crystal, was that on? And I was like, yeah, it was on, but I could tell you didn't believe in it. So I knew if I gave you a little pressure, then that would convince you even further that this must not be on, I don't believe. So that's just like kind of interesting. So let me just take a quick look at my notes to make sure I covered everything from a safety perspective. Yeah, so just make sure that you tap early, tap often when you are on the receiving end. You do not want to be going to sleep every single time a person has a submission on you, because especially as a white belt, that's going to be a lot of time without oxygen going to your brain. So that's why when we practice jiu-jitsu, it's a sport that requires you to tap. That way you're not causing injury to yourself. Like, there's a shirt that says, like, tap, snap, or nap. Like, that's quite true. So yeah, so thank you so much for watching. If you have made it this far, definitely, we should be friends. Go ahead and make sure that you've subscribed to this channel, because the videos are just, bomb.com. Like, you know. But on a like heartfelt note though, like on a serious note, it is, so when you are, all right, so there's a vibe that people that don't train kind of have of like, oh my God, like, yeah, you choked him out. Yeah, I got this submission. Like, that's very ego involved. One thing to keep in mind is that like your training partners, like you would not be able to train jiu-jitsu without your training partners. If you went and injured all of your training partners, like you would not have anybody to train jiu-jitsu with. So we have like those that practice jiu-jitsu and have been rolling for a while, like know the value of protecting your training partner, because if you hurt your training partner, you're going to feel really bad. And if it keeps on happening, like nobody is going to want to train like with you, and they can tell the vibe of somebody. If you are purposely trying to hurt people on the mat, like that is not a good place to be, because there are some black belt sharks out there. There's always somebody on the mat that will be able to beat you up. And you definitely do not want to be on the bad side of the black belts. Like there's a lot of justice that can happen on the mats. And you know, you'll get kicked out. Like you're not going to last long with an attitude like that on the mat. So it's just really important to train with the health and safety of your training partners in mind. Like even during when we are in class and we're practicing techniques, if it's a technique that's like really heavy on the head and has like a lot of spinal pressure, like I'll ask my partner like, hey, is this comfortable for you? Is this okay? Like, yes, a lot of jiu-jitsu techniques are meant to make your partner uncomfortable. That's if they're working, but there's also a line between, is this making it so uncomfortable that my training partner is going to have a sore neck for a week? Like I want to make sure that you know, like taking care of my training partners, because, you know, just a caring person I am. Just choke them out and hug. No, but all right, so thank you so much for watching. And finally, Trail, what is it, 812, you got your story time of choke, so you can stop asking me and leaving 5 million comments on every one of my videos, because what are you doing? Are you a robot? Like that's getting awkward. Go take a jiu-jitsu class, do something. All right. But until next time, I believe in you. You can do it. Keep on training. I know it's tough in the beginning. Like who likes going to class and rolling and literally getting submitted, you know, a lot every night, but it does get better, and you do make progress in getting less sucky. You're going to spend less and less time in those negative positions, and you're going to become harder and harder to submit, and that's progress. All right. So until next time, bye.